Hey everyone, Mr. Evans here with your pre-recorded live lesson for Unit 7, Lesson 7, The Evolution of the Influenza Virus. Now you may have noticed in your planner this lesson has actually been skipped out. We've skipped out Lesson 12 and Lesson 13, which is this lesson as well as the quick check for this lesson. And the reason we did that is because the way this lesson is presented is very different from the rest of the lessons in the unit. So we didn't think it was like a really good fit. And also there's a lot of concepts and vocabulary words and stuff that just don't really mesh too well with the rest of the unit. But we did feel that it was still important for you to have some exposure to this information because it's relevant in the world today, because it talks about viruses and mutations, and as we all know right now, there is a very particular and well-known virus spreading across the world and causing a lot of havoc. Hopefully we're starting to get a handle on that, but it still does exist. And the fact that viruses mutate is very relevant. You may have heard in the news that there are several new variations of the COVID strain that are popping up. You know, now that it's been around for a while, you hear about the UK strain, the South African strain, the Brazilian strain, so on and so forth. And we're going to talk about what that means and why it's important and why it could be significant. So, viruses mutate, and as we have talked about before, in order for a mutation to be passed along to the next generation, it has to be involved in the mutation has to be in the reproductive cells of the organism. Well, a virus, it's just a virus. There are no reproductive cells. It just takes over a cell, incorporates its DNA into the cell, and makes a billion copies of itself using the cell. So any mutation that happens in a virus, in the parent virus, is going to be passed on to the next generation. A virus doesn't have somatic cells or gametes or sex cells, it's just the virus. So when a mutation happens in a virus through the same mechanisms that we've talked about already, that mutation is going to be passed on to the billion viruses that come as a result of that virus taking over a cell and replicating itself. So mutations happen very fast and very rapidly in viruses. Really fast. Now again, just like everything else, most of those mutations don't do anything. They're just inert, they don't provide an advantage. Some of them are harmful, some of them make them weaker, but some of them make the virus stronger and maybe more infectious and have different effects on its host than the original strain. And you have to remember, when you're talking about trillions of viruses creating trillions of copies in millions of people, just from the sheer numbers of mutations happening, some of them are going to increase the competitive advantage of the virus. It's just a numbers game. There's just so much happening so often. And something to remember about a virus, I've mentioned this before. A virus does not want to kill its host. It is not a competitive advantage for a virus to kill its host. That would be like an organism moving into a house and just burning it down. A competitive advantage for a virus is infectivity, and whatever allows the virus to spread and reproduce to more hosts. Think about something that's like really super lethal, like Ebola. Okay, Ebola is a very dangerous virus, but it hasn't had a worldwide breakout, and chances are it's not going to, because Ebola kills its host very fast. And the host just doesn't have a chance to spread the virus around. So Ebola kind of burns itself out really quick. I know that's kind of morbid to think about, but we're just kind of sticking to the cold science here. Ebola burns itself out. But the most competitive viruses, the ones that are the most effective at spreading and reproducing, are ones that infect their host and don't necessarily kill the host, but keep the host alive so that they can continue to spread the virus around. Now, we still are studying COVID, okay, but COVID is basically a variant of the common cold. It's a more dangerous variant of the common cold. So that is why it is so infectious to humans. I mean, cold virus is everywhere. You can catch a regular old cold anytime, and it's been with us forever. Colds and flu have always been around. So those are viruses that are have kind of co-evolved with humans. A regular common cold and the flu, those are viruses that have co-evolved with us because generally speaking, they're not fatal. They infect the host sneezes and coughs and throws up and spreads the virus around to other people, and then you get better. Usually, not always, but usually you do. In terms of a virus, that's a successful virus. It lets it be spread around. Doesn't necessarily kill off its host right away. The reason COVID is so dangerous and so bad is because it is a mutated strain, and like I said, we're still learning a lot about it, that was mutated in a bat, and this is still theory, just kind of going off what is known so far. A bat, it got into a bat, it mutated in the bat, and then it got passed back to a human a little bit different. So it is more deadly to humans than a normal cold virus, and it has a bigger impact on the human system. All of the symptoms of COVID, like the respiratory problems, the fever, the organ damage, those are side effects. That's the side effect of the virus and how aggressively your immune system is responding to the virus. A lot of times the immune system can kind of go into overdrive to try and kill off a virus. It would be like if a house catches on fire and part of the house is on fire, and then the fire department comes and picks up the house and dunks it into the ocean. It's like, yeah, you put the fire out, but now you've completely flooded the house and it's all ruined anyways. So it's like, that's what your immune system does. Sometimes your immune system just goes haywire, goes crazy, and often causes damage to the body in the pursuit of trying to rid it of the virus. So our bodies just have a really nasty response to COVID. And it's a whole combination of factors. But COVID is a variant of the common cold that our bodies just don't respond to as well as the regular common cold. So let's go into what kind of happens with viruses as they mutate and as they spread. Okay, so we're going to look at the influenza virus and what happens with flu. Flu mutates all the time. All the time. If you're a person who gets flu shots, every year they say you have to get a flu shot. That's because it is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. There's a new flu strain every year or two where, the vaccine for the flu, it has to be updated and changed all the time to work. And the flu virus mutates so fast that the flu vaccine isn't really that effective. I think it's usually about between 40 and 70% effective, depending on the strain from year to year, because the pharmaceutical companies have to try and keep up with these mutations. They have to isolate new strains and find out what changed about them and modify the vaccine so it works again. And it's like an arms race. The flu virus is changing all the time. The pharmacy people are trying to change it and make the vaccine work for that strain. So it's it's a constant back and forth between humans and the virus. Now, to that end, one of the reasons they're still telling us to wear masks, okay, and people have their thoughts about masks, but here's the brass tacks of it. Here's why you wear a mask. Wearing a mask keeps, if a person is infected with the virus, okay, they're already infected. If a person has COVID, it's in them. They got it. Put a mask on. It keeps, and you breathe out, it keeps the virus in your breath that's on the moisture droplets, in your immediate area. It doesn't completely stop it. It's not like a lead wall, that keeps all the virus into you, but it does keep it in like your immediate vicinity. All right, you can see plenty of YouTube videos where people like breathe without a mask on. You can see the moisture going all over the place, like on a cold day when you breathe out and you can see the fog of your breath. That's how far your breath is going. On a cold day when you breathe out, you can see your breath scattering around. Now, if you do that with a mask on, the breath kind of comes out the sides and it kind of rolls down your body. It just doesn't go as far. Now, here's the reason why it's important that we continue to do that. In order for a virus to mutate, okay, it has to spread. It has to get into a new host. It has to make new replicants of itself. It has to create new copies of itself. And even if the person it infects doesn't get sick, let's say their immune system can fight it off, the virus is still in them replicating a million times. And maybe their immune system fights it off just fine. Maybe they don't even know they have it. But the virus is still replicating. And every time virus replicates, there's a chance of it mutating every single time. And one of those mutations, out of the million copies that it makes of itself, could be a mutation that makes it a lot more deadly. So the point of wearing the masks isn't to keep you safe. As has been pointed out, viruses are small. People usually wear masks wrong and they touch their face or whatever. Masks have a low chance of preventing the person wearing it from getting sick, but it is very good at keeping the virus from spreading around into new people and mutating and developing a much worse version of it through mutation. So that's why we wear the masks. Unless you're in a full hazmat suit, if someone who has COVID breathes right on you, you're probably going to get it. So I just kind of want to clear the mask thing up. The point of the masks is to keep it from spreading. So the more people are wearing them, even if they don't wear them all the time. There's plenty of things where it's oh, how come I can take my mask off in a restaurant and eat in a restaurant? Okay, well, it's better to have your mask on 50% of the time than not at all. If you're in a restaurant, just from numbers, because when you have the mask on, you're spreading it less. You're giving the virus less chance to spread, less chance to mutate. That's why we do the masks. All right, so I've said my piece on that. Let's get into the influenza virus. All right, so the way a virus tries to outwit its host is by changing its outward appearance. When you are infected with the flu, let's call it flu strain A, all right, you get infected, you get sick, but eventually your body recognizes it as an invader. Your body develops antibodies. Your immune cell gets triggered, the memory cells fire up, the white blood cells go to work, it clears it out, you're sick for a few days, and then you're good. All right. But what's left? Maybe there are just a few little viruses left over that look a little bit different. Okay, and those survive. And maybe they don't propagate enough to get you sick, but they're still in there. Okay? And also, the original strain A is still there. Even if your body is able to fight it off so you have no symptoms, it's still there. You probably have flu virus in you right now. Everyone probably has some flu virus in them all the time. Your body's just able to keep it at bay. Your immune system's able to handle it. But it's still there, it's still replicating, it's getting spread around. And let's say that out of the trillion replicants of virus that's going down, one of them has a mutation that changes one of the proteins on the virus's surface. And the two proteins they're talking about in the lesson are hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. Now, you don't need to remember those names. Just know that they are proteins on the surface here of the virus. They're just little proteins. Now, normally, these proteins here that are stuck on the surface are what your body recognizes. Your memory cells say, hey, I recognize that protein. That's stuck on a flu virus, and the memory cells, hey, goes to your immune system and says, hey, fire up those antigens for that thing. We need to get that out of here. I recognize that. And boom, your immune system fires up those antibodies. The antibodies stick to these proteins, put up big red flags, and say, hey, white blood cells, come over here and grab this thing and dissolve it. Okay, boom, no problem. But let's say that there's just a mutation that makes one of these proteins look a little bit different. Just a little bit different. Imagine if a person who you knew fairly well, you've seen him before, got a nose job. A nose job. And he's coming up to you, and, you kind of recognize him, but then he gets closer and you're like, oh, sorry, I thought you were someone else. He just looks a little bit different. Maybe you recognize him, maybe you don't, but you're not sure. That's kind of what happens here. And you only need one mutation for this to happen. One mutation to make one of these proteins look a little bit different. Okay, so now your immune system's like, okay, I don't know. I don't know if I want to waste resources, raising the red alert for the whole body here. He's not really doing anything. So, your immune system just kind of ignores it. Looks a little different. Well, guess what? It's still the flu. This is now flu strain B. And your immune system doesn't recognize it. It infects a cell, does its thing, gets you sick, and then the immune system says, oh crap, this guy just had a nose job. It's still flu. And then the cycle starts all over again. And then the next year it mutates into flu strain C. It looks a little bit different. So it's a constant back and forth. When this happens, it's called antigenic drift. Antigenic drift. This is it's random, okay? It's the mutation itself happens by random circumstance. All right, just something random causes the mutation to happen. Like I said before, a lot of times it does nothing, but maybe it's the right mutation in the right protein on the virus so that your immune system can't recognize it anymore. When that happens, natural selection takes over. Your immune system recognizes all of virus strain A, kills it off. Virus strain B makes it through the process. It has a competitive survival advantage. Your immune system can't recognize it anymore, so it lives. And it becomes infectious, and it does its thing. So antigenic drift, random mutations that, happen a billion times, and one of them eventually confers a survival advantage to the virus. Now, here's the other thing, too. We're going to talk about antibiotic resistance. Now, antibiotics work against bacteria, not viruses. There's a difference. And I don't remember if we talked about the difference extensively in the previous lessons, but no, there's a difference between a bacteria and a virus. A bacteria is a single-celled organism with all of its own reproductive capacities. They're prokaryotic, and they're self-sufficient. Bacteria still need a food source, some kind of nutrient source to survive, but they're single-celled organisms that are self-sufficient. A virus must have a host to reproduce. So there's a difference there. I just wanted to mention that. But there are antiviral agents too. Antibiotics, everyone's probably had those when they've got a cold or not a cold's a virus. Let's say strep throat. If you get strep throat, doctor's probably going to give you antibiotics to fix it. Antivirals are prescribed less often, but they still do exist. But the same principle holds true. The development of resistance to drugs is also a factor of bacterial and viral mutation. If you have strep throat and the doctor prescribes you antibiotics, all right, and you take half of what the doctor tells you to take, like you feel crummy, you start taking antibiotics, a few days later you feel better, so you stop taking them. You don't follow the doctor's orders. Well, think about what happened. When you first start taking the antibiotics, all of the weak bacteria are killed off really quickly by the antibiotics. And then you start feeling better because most of the bacteria is gone. But what's left? the stronger ones, the ones that have some resistance. And they start to replicate again. And now all those bacteria probably have that stronger resistance. So now it can come roaring back if you don't finish your antibiotics. You got to wipe out all the bacterias, not just kill off the weak ones and let the stronger ones take over again. Furthermore, as time goes by and antibiotics have become more and more widespread. I mean, they used to prescribe antibiotics for anything. They're like, oh, you're feeling bad, here, take these antibiotics. Well, guess what? Mutations happen. Natural selection happens. And now a lot of bacteria these days are resistant or even immune to a lot of the antibiotics that were prescribed in the past. We're having to constantly come up with new antibiotics to fight new bacterial infections where the old stuff we use just doesn't work anymore. It's the same thing with antivirals. There's antiviral stuff, but it can develop immunity to that as well. And that all comes back to stopping the spread of this stuff. Because if a virus or a bacteria cannot find a new host, cannot reproduce, cannot spread, cannot replicate, there's no mutations. It can't mutate if it's not reproducing. Well, it can mutate, but it's just not going to pass that on to the next generation because it's not spreading anymore. So, since we know so little about COVID, and we're still learning about it and studying it and what its long-term effects are, the best thing we can do right now is slow down its mutation rate, slow down its spread rate. Even if people get vaccinated, the COVID virus can still be in you. And we don't know enough about it yet to be like, cool, I'm vaccinated, whatever. Okay, then all of a sudden the thing mutates and it comes back 10 times worse. So that's why we're still wearing the masks. It's not to protect the person wearing the mask. And once everybody gets vaccinated, or a lot more people get vaccinated, it's not even necessarily going to be about stopping the spread. Because if everyone's vaccinated and no one's getting sick from it anymore, it's still there. And it can still mutate. And until we have studied this enough to be able to keep up with it, we need to just throw the brakes on it. Don't let it spread. Don't let it get around. Now, as more research goes on, and we completely sequence this thing and break it down and analyze all of its genes and know exactly how it works, we'll feel a little bit more comfortable about it. Maybe COVID will eventually become just like the flu. It stinks to get the flu. It is very dangerous to some people, but it's just something that's there and we have to live with. But we don't know yet. So, wear your mask. Slow the spread, so we can get a little bit more time to see where this thing's going. Right now in the cold, the mask keeps your face warm, right? If you feel better about it, wear just one of those masks that's just made to keep your face warm. Anything to just keep your breath from flying out all over the place. It doesn't hurt. I do it. I'm vaccinated and I still wear the mask. Keeps my face warm. But, I kind of want to just clear that up. We're trying to give the virus less chance to mutate. That's what it's about right now. So anyways, we just wanted to give you some exposure to that. The quick check for this has been dropped. So take this information as you will. Thank you for all watching and have a fantastic day.